Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
We're living through some unique times, and there's a specific kind of fear that takes hold when a mob finds its truth. It's the fear that if you don't nod along, you're going to be trampled. And there's a realization that in the heat of the moment, the crowd doesn't want justice. It wants submission. It wants surrender. And we see it everywhere now. We see a surge of moral certainty that moves faster than any fact ever could. When the mob decides it is righteous, hesitation is no longer seen as a virtue. It's seen as a crime. If you pause, if you ask questions, if you push back, ask for evidence, simply say, we need to follow the law. You aren't just disagreed with. You're declared an enemy of the mob. And the mob believes its morality is superior to the Constitution. It believes that if elected officials don't do what they want, the crowd has a mandate to step in and enforce its own rules, to block streets, to intimidate dissenters, to burn the system down in order to what they believe is saving it. This is exactly what we're witnessing in places like Minneapolis, where we see this momentary impulse of the crowd that has claimed moral authority over the law itself. We think this is a byproduct of modern social media, 21st century anger, this socialist Marxist push in our country. But more than 2 centuries ago, one of the founders looked at the exact energy and he didn't see progress. He saw a volcano that was about to erupt, and he warned that democracy is a creature of impulse, contains the fiery volcanic materials of its own destruction. His name was Fisher Ames, and he knew that once the mob believes it is God, the republic is dead. And this is what I want to focus on for today's America's Founding series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure to follow and subscribe. Share this episode with other patriots, because to understand what is at stake, our past tells a story. And if Fisher Ames were alive today, he wouldn't just be alarmed by what he sees. He would wonder why his warnings weren't heeded. So you may not see Fisher Ames. His name doesn't trend. He doesn't appear in many of the textbooks. His quotes aren't as visible as the more popular framers, but he mattered, and he mattered immensely. He was a Massachusetts-born lawyer, a gifted orator, a member of the First Congress, and he helped shape the early republic at a moment when nothing was guaranteed. There wasn't unity. There wasn't stability. Our survival was even in question. Will this young nation be able to forge forward? He was also frequently sick. He was chronically weak, writing and speaking under physical strain, and that matters. Because Ames's warnings didn't come from this youthful idealism. He wasn't some radical. He didn't approach things from a revolutionary fervor. His warnings came from observation, from someone who could feel how fragile the American experiment really was. He believed deeply in liberty, and he feared despotism. But unlike many who fought a revolution, he also feared what happens after a revolution. When passions don't know when to stop, when people don't know how to keep themselves in check. Ames wasn't obsessed with power. He was obsessed with human behavior under pressure. He understood the mindset of human beings and the flaws that come with them. He believed something that would be considered heretical to today's mob, and not just to mobs, but to most people, that the people are often wrong in the heat of the moment. And if they wait, if they're capable of waiting, then they may be right later. He warned repeatedly about what he called the, quote, momentary impulse of the public mind, the flashes of certainty when emotion surges, when outrage is fresh, it feels self-evident and righteous, when disagreement feels immoral. Ames made a cold, vital distinction here. He believed the people only existed when they were governed by reason and law, when they used their minds and they thought carefully, when they used the ability to think critically. When they're governed by impulse, when they're governed by passion and emotions, they weren't the people anymore. They were a mob. To Ames, it was simple. A citizen is someone who thinks. A member of the mob is someone who is driven by emotion. And even though he was skeptical of human beings, he had faith in what he called the, quote, sober second thought of the people. And think about that phrase for a minute, because it's so powerful, the sober second thought of the people. To him, Taking the time to think things through wasn't a weakness or surrender. It was maturity. It was clarity. And once the heat faded, that clarity could save us from ourselves. And I want you to think about when you're arguing with a friend or a family member. It happens to all of us. In the heat of the moment, we lack self-control. You are unable to bite your tongue. You may say things that you later regret. It was impulse. That's what you were operating on. And had you taken 5 minutes to cool down a little bit, the situation could have been much different. Well, the same holds true with government politics in our society as a whole. Who creates the government? Who forms it? It's the people. Who's engaged in politics? The people. Who makes up society? The people. And Ames believed that liberty depended on moving slowly. Now, this wasn't meant to silence people, wasn't meant to quiet voices. It was meant to allow facts to emerge, allow debate to occur, arguments to clash with each other. Be deliberative before you push policies. And we tell people not to make life-changing decisions without thinking it through. Never make decisions in anger. Yet today all we see is rage and righteous indignation. It's the reason that Ames despised democracy. He knew that democracy wasn't about the will of the people. It was about the impulses that allowed us most dominant voices within society. And this insight shaped how Ames defended the Constitution itself. See, the founders didn't design the system for efficiency. They designed it for restraint. Our system is slow, awkward, and complex for a reason. These safeguards were built in, and they are essential to the Republic. Ames defended these features because they forced time into the system. Centuries later, Justice Antonin Scalia, the great Scalia, made the same point in blunt modern language. He said people complain about gridlock. They complain about dysfunctional government, he said. They hate it. They think it proves that the system is broken, and it's why the legislative branch always has the lowest approval ratings. But gridlock is the Constitution working exactly as designed, and if we had an education system, maybe more people would know that. Gridlock is essential. That delay is a defensive mechanism, and Ames would have agreed completely with Scalia. Because what he feared wasn't disagreement. It was the righteous mobs operating with this idea of a sense of urgency, the knee-jerk reactions, the idea that something needs to be done even if doing something makes everything worse. Fisher Ames saw the same problems back in his day. They may not have operated on algorithms and viral videos with social media, but one thing Ames understood best was human behavior. Human behavior is the one constant. Nations rise, nations fall. Wars begin, wars end. Governments form, governments collapse. The one constant throughout history is human behavior. Over and over again, politicians, bureaucrats, they feel pressured to act immediately, not because action is prudent or wise, but because inaction is politically dangerous. Look at 9/11. Following 9/11, the American people were scared. They didn't want to see another attack, and they were willing to trade some of their liberty for the illusion of security. And within a month and a half, the Patriot Act, one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in American history, passed in record time. There was no real debate, no real discussion. The politicians obliged the people, and the people paid an enormous price. We sacrificed a lot for the Patriot Act. Perhaps if we were more deliberative, we would have foreseen the follies of this bill. Same thing with the pandemic, right? Public fear, demands on the government to keep them safe, no policy debates, no discussions, just dictatorial decrees, policies that caused enormous harm in our society. And if we just slowed things down a bit, if we had those debates, perhaps some would have seen that the remedies were far worse than the disease itself. Unfortunately, we routinely witness these emotional surges that turn into permanent political decisions, and it's those impulses that represent a threat to the Republic. Ames understood something that's timeless. Once emotion declares itself morally superior, law itself becomes suspect. We see this today, not just in one single issue, it's all over the place. There's a pattern. The belief that because a crowd feels righteous, it has to be right. We look at places like Minneapolis. There's no debate. No arguments about policy. It's moral certainty of the mob. And anyone who disagrees with the righteous mob isn't just an opponent. They become an enemy. Look at how mobs are accosting people, ordinary citizens. And if ordinary citizens want their freedom of movement, if they want to gain passage, they're pressured to disavow ICE. Law enforcement isn't just being criticized, it's being delegitimized. Institutions aren't debating. They're labeled as symbols of evil that must be destroyed. It really is a terrifying shift where the crowd decides that if the system isn't doing what they want, they have a right to become a law. When you see groups blocking roads, intimidating people, assaulting people, harassing people, declaring autonomous zones, you are seeing exactly what Fisher Ames warned about. You are seeing that volcano erupt. The mob enforces their own rules, their own justice in real time. And this is really important to understand because it's not about immigration enforcement. It's not about ICE. It's not even about Donald Trump. It's about whether the law and our Constitution still has legitimacy. And Ames would tell us, when the crowd claims authority over the system, you no longer have a republic. You have a countdown to despotism. What you're witnessing isn't people exercising liberty. It doesn't make us freer. It produces instability. We see the mob thrives using pressure, intimidation, and force, declaring that if they get into power, that their political opponent shouldn't be on social media for 4 years, that there should be re-education camps to deprogram. Mobs reject reality. They operate through impulse. They ignore the very things that are essential to the lifeblood of the republic. I mean, Ames understood. Facts exist. Debate clarifies. Time corrects errors, and truth is essential. The truth that exists in the nature of everything, it doesn't depend upon our acceptance to give it its binding force of validity. But today, what do you see? It all seems dead. Today, the left and the mob, they want you to believe that truth is subjective, that there's the idea of my truth, that reality can be produced, that reality can be curated. People get to see only what they want to see. Without facts, there is no second thought that Fisher Ames was talking about. There's only emotion and impulse. And you're either with the mob or you're against the mob. What he feared has arrived. And it's accelerated because the guardrails he relied on don't really exist. In Ames's world, debate acted as a filtration system. Raw passion went in, then there's time, disagreement, evidence, stripped away the errors, the misconceptions, and something more stable came out of it. But because of how rapidly society is moving, how different our world works, modern technology has created a bypass valve. People no longer wait for reflection. They render judgment within minutes. And I want you to think logically. I mean, I brought up the Epstein files on Monday's episode. The Epstein files released Friday. Within 5 minutes, people were posting as if they were stating facts. 3.5 million documents. No chance that you were able to go through those documents. Same thing. We watch a 15-second video clip and we all form judgments. We don't care about what preceded the video clip, what happened in the 5 minutes before, or what happened in the 5 minutes afterwards. Just that 15 seconds, we're going to render judgment. They seek validation. People only want to be told that they're right. They only seek out information that's going to confirm their opinions. It's confirmation bias. And Ames knew that a volcano doesn't just erupt on its own. It needs a spark. He warned about the demagogues, the politicians, and the influencers who don't lead, but instead they pander. They pander, they inflame passions, they validate the mob. Does that sound familiar to you? Think about it. They tell the mob exactly what they want to hear. They grant the mob the authority to act on that impulse, tell them that they're fighting the good fight, the righteous fight. They frame the mob as moral crusaders and convince them that they're fighting against Nazis and fascists rather than fellow citizens. So instead of revising beliefs based on the facts, they attempt to alter reality. It's why they want to program everyone to believe that we are in a democracy and the will of the people should always prevail. But Fisher Ames, like most of the founders, they didn't just worry about democracy. They despised democracy. He saw it for what it truly is, a creature of whim that eventually eats itself. And he was standing on the shoulders of Plato, who warned thousands of years ago that democracy is the worst form of government because it is nothing more than mob rule, a chaotic stepping stone that always ends in the arms of the tyrant. This is why we were never intended to be a democracy. We were built as a republic. Ames knew that democracy collapses under its own intensity, not because people stop caring, but because they care without any possible restraint. They make passion the cause. They mistake passion for law, their outrage for justice. And as Franklin famously warned us, it's a republic if you can keep it. Fisher Ames is telling us exactly how we're losing it. Now, if you found this episode informative, please share this with 3 to 4 other great patriots. We have to get people to understand our past, to understand our founding, the warnings that were laid out at the very beginning of this country. If we just understood them, much of what we see today wouldn't be happening. So share this episode with family, friends. Take 30 seconds, write a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, whatever podcast platform that you use. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with more great episodes of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.